week, the British Army is facing a recruitment crisis as tens of thousands of potential soldiers withdraw their applications due to admission delays. Applicants are taking up to 6 months to go through the recruitment process, with 70% of them pulling out before they get through the doors. The alarming data comes amid mounting concerns surrounding defence numbers, meaning the Army could dip below its largest force of 73,000 personnel within months. Joining us live to discuss this, the journalist who broke the story, the Times Defence editor Larisa Brown, former head of counter-terrorism Major General Chip Chapman, and former British Army Commander Major General Tim Cross. Thank you all very much indeed for joining me. Larisa, would you just set out the stall of this story? Because increasingly on this programme, we're talking about, imminent threats from various foreign powers and a volatile situation in the world, and whether we need much more serious consideration about our armed forces, investment therein, and recruitment too. So this is a story that makes people already concerned about this much more concerned than they were before.
Yes, absolutely. And we've been given these astonishing figures from the Labour Party, and they really set out it's quite astonishing that we're getting tens of thousands of young people that are showing an interest. They're actually expressing that initial interest in joining the armed forces. But then because they're having to wait so long to get through the process, they're giving up. And I was speaking to Grant Shapps, the Defence Secretary, last week, and he was saying that the Amazon generation is how he described it. People, the youngsters that get things instantly, don't want to have to wait that long to join the armed forces. And he actually said himself that the whole recruitment process was ludicrous. And then now we've actually been given these figures which show that tens of thousands of people have applied last year and then gave up during the process. It's just quite amazing data, really. And for me, who's written a lot of stories about the recruitment crisis and about how the Army's so short of people and the Navy is and the RAF, to then find out that actually they are getting that interest, but then they're actually not being able to deal with the applications quick enough, is just really interesting.
So interesting is one way of describing it, interesting, but I think people will think it absolutely appalling. But why is it taking so long is the key question. If young people are keen enough to bother to apply, why is it taking so long to process the applications, and why so long to make decisions?
Well, I'm told one of the key reasons is the medical process. So they've got to involve doctors in a lot of cases. If people have got something wrong with them, then they've got to get a second opinion. The military does not allow quite a lot of people for quite what people might assume quite trivial small things. For example, if they've got a parent that has got some sort of health issue, then that can be taken into account. Also, even things like tattoos, they need to look at. They sometimes do big assessments on the nature of tattoos and where they are, and other things such as asthma. So I think all of that can take quite a while. And then it's a bit unclear, really. I asked the Army about it and they didn't really have any answers. In fact, actually, they were saying that they thought to wait an average of 5.3 months isn't really that bad, and they think that they're getting better at it.
Gosh, let me bring Major General Chip Chapman into this. Are you surprised by this? Is this something that you think is horrifying, or is this fairly routine?
I'm not surprised by it. I'm horrified by it. The problem is someone like the Earl of Minto, who's the defence rep in the House of Lords, recently told us that there were 10,000 applications to join the British Army in January. That's an irrelevant metric if you can't get them into the input, basic training starts, and then the output, a trained soldier, sailor or airman. And what we've really found here is that we've actually got Gen Z. We've captured their interest. They want to join the Army. We've then lost them because we talk about Gen Z of having an 8-second filter. If they're not engaged in the process after they've had that interest, they'll move on. And it's that agility which we're not seeing in the recruitment process. And like everything in the Army or armed forces, agility has a doctrinal definition. It's flexibility, adaptability, and responsiveness. And the armed forces are failing on all those accounts in terms of the recruiting process.
But do you have any idea what is required that takes so long? Because you think, before you have, let's say, a major operation, you fill in the form. Have you got this ailment, this complaint? Have you got a pacemaker? Have you got this, that and the other? And you put yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And then you either do or don't have the operation. The data's right there. You filled in the form. What are the sorts of things that take so much investigation and in such a prolonged manner? Why is it not possible to see the young person, see what what they offer and decide yes, no, yes, you're in, no, you're not?
Well, the recruitment choke points, as Larisa said, are partly to do with medical. And one of the things which has occurred really in the last 30 or 40 years is absolute risk aversion, because the Ministry of Defence can now be sued. So it might have been more agile 40 years ago. It isn't so now. And an example of that is Larisa, for example, mentioned about tattoos. If you've got tattoos on your hands now or above the neck, behind your ear, that has to go to a military judgment panel. We've not decentralized decision making at the lowest level to people to make these decisions. So all these things are compounding things. The other thing is that the medical side, it's not digitized. There is no digitized medical process, and the figures are also probably skewed by those wanting to join from Commonwealth countries, for which the processes are almost naturally going to take longer, but shouldn't in the digital age. So catching up from an analog system of paper, really, which you kind of alluded to in a way, Vanessa, to a digital age means that we should be more agile in doing these things, and we're currently not.
I mean, this really is a horrifying story. Let me bring Major General Tim Cross into this conversation, because many times in the last few months on this show, I've spoken to lieutenant colonels and to commanders and to all sorts of people, all saying what we need, army recruitment must be up. We have to make it seem like an enticing and stimulating and very valuable and incredibly responsible, interesting career. It's very, very important. And now we hear that recruitment is being hindered and hampered by, writing notes in a fountain pen or on a piece of parchment, and tattoos being individually carefully examined by a large committee that has to decide if they're going to be a danger or not. What do you make of this?
Well, I have to tell you, this is not a new story. This has been going on for years. When I joined up, and I expect Chip did the same thing, you went to a recruiting office, you spoke to people, they looked at you, you tatted, you filled in forms and so forth.
Yeah.
A number of years ago, I was the Army advisor to the House of Commons Defence Committee for 7 years, back in the about 2010, something like that, for about 7 years. And the MOD, outsourced the recruiting process to a private company called Capita. And they said, we are going to save you an awful lot of money by putting this whole thing online. People will get online, they'll fill in the forms, and everything will be, we can close all these recruiting offices, we can get rid of all those people manning those recruiting offices, and it will all be fine. It ran into trouble very quickly, and there were a number of inquiries actually within the Defence Committee. And I personally met the head of Capita at one point to talk to him about the fact that this just wasn't working. And that was partly because my own grandson went through this problem. He waited about, I can't remember now, 10, 12 months, and in the end gave up and went and worked somewhere else. In fact, he's just been through the recruiting process for BAE Systems, and it was very slick, very fast, and he had an interview with people face to face. Now, the problem here is that part of it, and you've referred to it already, is the medical piece, and Chip was talking about this. When you fill in these forms online, if you tick the wrong box, very quickly you can be filtered out. And if you tick a box that says, I had asthma as a child, or, in my grandson's case, actually, he'd fallen off a train and had a brain injury, then the whole thing just grinds to a halt. And you do need to see a medic. So I just think the system is broken. I mean, I've been saying this for years. I think we need to get rid of Capita. I think we need to go back to recruiting properly. And we're in a downward spiral here. The message that's going out is this thing is not working. Therefore, people won't apply. We're not taking enough people in, and we're going to fall well below the very small figure, in my view, far too small figure of an army of about 70,000.
I mean, it is absolutely ludicrous, isn't it, when you say if there's any kind of blip or anomaly, childhood asthma, whatever else it is, it all just falls apart completely. You just have to wait months and months for some medic to actually look at the person. Why should it take months? There are doctors everywhere. Doctors can be paid privately if they need to be accessed over a weekend or something. It can't be beyond the wit of man or beast to just hook them up immediately and get a yes or a no, can it?
Well, it's not going to happen overnight, obviously, but and we need to be, one sense, we need to be a bit careful, because as Chip again has already referred to, you can't afford to take people in who medically unfit, put them through a training program, and then they end up in trouble because the MOD itself will be in trouble. So you've got to have a process for this, and finding medics, doctors, and so forth to do these examinations. Oh, we all know the state of the NHS and so on. So I don't want to outly condemn the fact that we do need to put people through a proper medical system and ensure that they are fit enough to join the military. the whole business of tattoos and other things too that used to be, you couldn't join if you had a tattoo, not that long ago. But all of those things need to be filtered through. But the bottom line is, it takes too much time. I don't know whether how we can, or how the MOD can resolve this. But part of it is somebody has to grip this organisation and get to grips with it and sort it out. Because this is, as I said earlier, I started off with, this is not a new problem. This has been going on for years.
Thank you all very much indeed. People will be absolutely flabbergasted. People who are not familiar with the fact that it's been going on for years will be, Larisa, astounded, I think, and horrified by your story. Thank you all so much. Really appreciate it.